Hi, my name is Mark Selzer, and this is the Libertarian Alternative. And the Libertarian Alternative is an educational television show brought to your community by the Libertarian Party. Today's guests are Edward Stringham and Benjamin Powell, and they're both professors at the Department of Economics at San Jose State University. And you also work for the...
I also direct a research center at the Independent Institute.
The Independent Institute. So what is the Independent Institute?
They're a public policy think tank based out of Oakland, California.
Yeah.
And I direct a center there on entrepreneurial innovation.
What does a think tank do?
Hopefully, thanks.
A lot of thinking.
A lot of thinking. You know, a lot of people hear that term all the time in the news now, more and more and more and more. But what does it mean? You issue policy papers and you try to influence public policy.
Yeah, in my case, it's quite a lot of what we do as professors, because people also think professors just teach instead of actually do their own research and write. So a lot of my research efforts are just focused through the think tank, in scholarly journal articles and public policy papers, and occasionally even on TV shows like yours.
So now you recently both were involved in a study that became a little bit well known. This had to do with housing.
Yeah, we've been causing quite a bit of trouble up and down California. We've done a few of these studies.
It is very well known. Two great authors, of course.
Yes, the one that got the most attention, I guess, we just published one, I think it was called Affordable Housing Mandates, Do Affordable Housing Mandates Work? Evidence from the San Francisco Bay Area, or something to that effect. And we studied all the communities in the Bay Area that have passed these things called affordable housing mandates.
The results were just as economic theory would predict. We found that after people imposed these crazy policies, lo and behold, housing production in those cities went way down. So we looked at cities before and after and found that on average housing production decreased by 30% after they adopted these policies.
God, this isn't rocket science either. I mean, 98% of all economists would agree with this. The problem is, in the policy world, there's a bunch of probably well-intentioned, at least in some cases, city planners and bureaucrats who want to promote affordable housing. Their way to do it is, we're just going to use price controls and limit what people can charge for new homes to a certain percentage of a development. Lo and behold, when you do that, guess who runs away?
The people that build houses.
You would think, wouldn't you? That's what we found.
But, you know, their idea is that these businessmen who are building these houses are so rich and greedy, they can afford to not make as much profit as the insane profits they must be making on building this housing.
Right, that's their assumption, and that's completely wrong. Because even if they are very rich and they're making tons of money, they're going to choose to go to the communities where they're going to make tons of money. And if you're imposing price controls in certain communities, but not all, they're going to leave those communities.
And this idea of them making tons of money is just ridiculous anyway. When one industry makes a boatload of money, what does everybody want to do? Throw money at it to invest, and then more people do it, you drive profit rates down, and you get a normal rate of return. What happens is some projects look really profitable after they're done. But going into these things for an investor to know how much they're going to make ahead of time just doesn't pencil out. And when you put these mandates in, it pushes down expected profits because you can count on the losses from these certain units, and you don't know how much profit you'll make on the other ones.
And the cost of housing, because of all the regulation in California, is driven up by about half.
Well, actually more, but we should say too, between states, guess which states has the highest profit margin for builders?
I don't know. I'd probably have to ask a couple of professors of economics to answer that question.
California, because all of these regulations drive out all the small people, so all that's left is the bigger corporations.
Right.
There's less competition. We did a project on one area, Fort Ord redevelopment, this military base that they're redeveloping for residential use. We met a builder who said he had moved up from LA. This is near Monterey. Moved up from LA to start the project. We said, oh, really? Well, how long have you been in the area? He said 10 years.
No, it was 13 years.
13, oh.
What have you been doing since then? I've been trying to get this project approved.
When you have something like that, your mom and pop builders get knocked out of the market. The only people who can finance it is a bigger company, so they're the only ones in there.
Right. If you make the minimum wage $10 an hour, the only people that will be able to afford to do business are the giant corporations.
Exactly.
But what you mentioned of how much of the price of home is comes from land regulation. What's the figure on this, Ed? The new study that came
Yeah,
out?
we found that basically doing a number of research studies have found that the high prices of homes are due completely to government regulations. So they looked at whether it was due to intrinsically valuable land or regulations, and people find that it's regulation which makes housing expensive.
So it's more than half is the cost of complying with
90%.
regulation.
Of
90%.
the difference, here was the statistic, between the difference of new home prices and physical construction cost, 90% of that difference was due to government land use regulations. Basically what they found is they said, if it's intrinsically valuable, scarce land that drives the price of homes, well then a home that has twice as big a lot should sell for twice the difference in the physical construction cost then. But instead they find out it only sells for 10% more. The other 90% of that difference is all government land use regulations, because what's scarce isn't land, but permission to build.
Right.
Actually, the epiphany for us when we were in California, we were talking out on my back deck one day and about how high housing prices were in California. We're obviously young guys to the area, assistant professors at the university. We wanted to buy homes. And we said, God, why are prices so high? And we're looking, there's this beautiful little mountain range on one side of the city and one on the other side. Guess what? There's not on either one of those.
Houses.
Yeah. And matter of fact, you leave San Jose, it's almost like jumping into a time warp machine. If you drive south, all of a sudden you cross under this one highway and no more houses. Somebody drew a line on the map and said no houses past here.
So, but can't we just want to cover everything with houses?
Well, in the market, not every single piece of land is going to be developed. And in private developments, such as Disneyland, they have this whole city called Celebration. There's a lot of green space. So under free markets, you're not going to be paving over paradise. But the number one important thing is if the land is not going to be used at all versus putting nice housing on it, we have to realize that you're going to be displacing people and making housing less affordable.
Okay, now is anyone listening? Are they just going to say, well, we'll just build government housing projects then and start packing people in those? I mean, are they going to listen? Is anyone listening?
Yes, people are listening. Luckily, most of the people we've talked to are bright enough that they don't say government housing projects are the answer. 'Cause everyone saw what a failure those were.
There's been 30 years of failure of government housing, and now people are starting to catch on. They're actually blowing these things up because they realize what a disaster it is. Unfortunately, the new lesson that they have learned, a mistaken lesson, is, well, we made a mistake, now let's make private home builders build a percentage of new units to be affordable.
What they realized, they know that the public housing was a failure, and they kind of know rent control was a failure, but they haven't put rent control as a price control and affordable housing mandates are a price control. Together they'll figure out that too is going to be a failure. So it's like wanting to have their cake and eat it too, because they'll say, I want more open space and more affordable housing. Economics is about trade-offs. And in a public policy that tries to promote two contradictory objectives is bound to failure.
There are so many instances where I've seen, and I've seen it myself in Santa Monica, I live near there, that the housing, the rent-controlled housing are all occupied by extremely wealthy people, because what the management does is they want to keep the cost down, so they get people that are very upwardly mobile, very neat, very clean, no problems, and they even institute policies like no pets. But I've been trying to get, I live in kind of a rent control building. It's some sort of pseudo rent control in LA. I'm trying to convince the management of that to try to get people who are rich to move into this apartment building, because I've got just an awful building that I live in. But I don't want to give it up because of the location. And the location is in Hollywood, okay? And that's, what's important. As we get now this is the argument for sprawl that I'm trying to make, is that if you get farther away from these urban centers, the housing